Reliable.
Right. Good morning, this is 7 o'clock. This is a public forum, but also the select board has noticed a meeting because of the forum. And so I'm just gonna call the select board over real quick and I expect the other members once they get out of their meeting. So I'll do a roll call vote.
Chris Flex here.
Ellen Mar present, Jean Haley the full present. I think we're all set, Justin.
All right,
Let me see.
sounds good. Justin, do you want to start?
Sure.
All right. Give me about 15 seconds to pop this up.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Jay Pimpari, 713 Jerusalem Road. I am the chair of the Sidewalk Safety and Connectivity Committee. Tonight, we're going to just give you a quick little overview of the committee, what we've been working on, etc. Show some nice fancy pictures, and I believe we have a video hot off the press that was finalized this afternoon that I did get a quick chance to glance at it, but you will all see it, and that will hit the social media, I believe, tomorrow. So we'll just give you a quick overview of what we're asking for, the goals and benefits, etc. You can see from some of these pictures here, top left, that's the newly paved or soon to be paved Elm Street. You see some nice paving on the other side there. Bottom right is, I believe that's Sawyer Street by Fair Oaks with the ADA compliant handicap accessible ramps. And the bottom left there is the newly paved Doan Street that was done probably back in May timeframe. So what does this committee do? Early this year, March or April, the select board created the Sidewalk Safety and Connectivity Committee. And we were basically charged with developing this 5-year plan to look at the roadway and sidewalk improvements. Basically, the improvements, again, you can read here, include the reconstruction of existing infrastructure, traffic calming measures. And we say traffic calming measures, we mean like bike paths, walking paths, crosswalks in certain areas where it will slow down the traffic a little bit, hopefully. And you'll see more of that on Elm Street as the project progresses later this year or in the next few weeks, I should say. And also looking at development of new sidewalks where sidewalks currently do not exist now, but are in dire need of a sidewalk. And so we were happy or fortunate enough that in 2022, the town had procured TEC to a consultant to do a full-blown sidewalk study. And so we reviewed that report. Basically, our 4 or 5 month assessment here in 2023, since we started, was that it just basically underscored the need for additional roadways and sidewalk funding. The roadways are in significant need of repair, etc., and more funding is needed. So what are we asking for? The select board is recommending the creation of a special stabilization fund for the roads and sidewalks. We have approximately 37 miles of public roadway. And if we're trying to pave our roads once every 20 years, which is really about the end of 20 years would really be stretching it out. We're looking at paving a road about 1.8 miles of roadway per year. And as you can imagine, the increase in cost in paving, services, contractor service, etc., has just been increasing yearly. And you know, we need more money to stay on this 20-year track. So 1 mile of roadway cost about $500,000 to repave. A mile of sidewalk is approximately $1 million. If you're putting that into perspective, you're thinking about how much roadway or sidewalk could we get paved with the money we have in the fund now. And so funding that is allocated to the town is about $800,000 in the annual sidewalks fund, and have another $200,000 roughly from the state. So the town is working approximately off of a $1 million budget. And again, you can see what we can get done for $1 million there. So our goals and benefits, we created 4 or 5 criteria, and you can read through here. The first one was the school connectivity. This is in no particular order at all, but we thought that school connectivity was huge. So we looked at different radii, a mile, half mile, a mile and a half. If you look at a 1 mile radii of each of the school campuses, and we only have 2 school campuses here, you cover a great amount of the town of Cohasset. It's quite impressive what that 1 mile radius looks like. And I think looking at the sidewalks and is probably in and around that 1 mile radius is where you're gonna hit most of the sidewalk and pedestrian traffic, not to say there's not in other areas. And so we also looked at trying to connect other parts of town, neighborhoods, schools, downtown, the harbor, potential public transportation, recreational use, et cetera. And then certainly looking at to create new sidewalks, repair the existing sidewalks when a road is paved. And a good example of that is Sawyer Street from the Dare Hill School up until Route 3A. You see that newly constructed sidewalk on the side there. That took a great amount of work. So we're trying to evaluate when a road is being paved, if the sidewalk can be done at the same time, if the budget allows that, to certainly do that. And if there's not a current sidewalk in there now, what would be the cost to do that? And what are the potential construction restraints associated with that? Next slide, please. So again, and also connectivity to recreational areas. We'd all probably love a sidewalk or a newly paved road to the harbor, to Sandy Beach, to Rocky Beach, to Whitney Fair, Wampatuck, et cetera. So we're looking at those areas again, just to see if we can connect those particular areas with the sidewalk. And then again, safety measures. If there's a roadway with a speed limit of 30 miles or more, and there are a few when there's no sidewalk, maybe potentially we could put bike lanes or a walking lane, et cetera. It doesn't cost a lot of money. And it's not putting a sidewalk in there, it's just creating some safety measures. And of course, obviously trying to address the needs of the town's consultant 2022 report. Big thank you to these only a handful of the members there. Brian Joyce, our Director of Public Works, Paul Grady, who's the Vice Chair, and Julie Rollins, who is Vice Chair of the committee. And also in attendance tonight, we have Frank Cicchetti here, and I know hopefully there's many more at home on Zoom watching in. So at this point, I believe we're going to see the video that is hot off the press. And then we'll take questions from anybody in the audience or anyone on Zoom. Softball questions first. Those are the easy ones. Brian's going to field all Brian's the numbers guy over there. Is that coming up?
Hello, my name is Jay Pimpari and I'm the chairperson of the Sidewalk Safety and Connectivity Committee in the town of Cohasset. Early this year, the Select Board created and charged our committee with identifying roadways and sidewalks that are in need of repair, as well as identifying areas of town where sidewalks currently do not exist but could definitely benefit from one. As we evaluate our immediate infrastructure needs, we are also identifying areas where safety measures such as bike paths, bike lanes, and added crosswalks could be installed. You will see more of these safety measures incorporated into the Elm Street paving project. We've been busy, and the first project we initiated was the paving of Doane Street from the town of Situate line down along the Beechwood Playground. Our work is just beginning. I encourage you to attend the November 13th Town Hall meeting and vote to support improvements to roadways and sidewalks.
My name is Paul Grady, and currently it is my honor to serve as Vice Chair of the Cohasset Select Board. The Cohasset Select Board has introduced a Roads and Stabilization Fund that we are asking you to support in November. For too long, maintenance has been deferred and too many cans have been kicked down the road. And this has an effect on pedestrians, it has an effect on traffic, vehicular and otherwise. It also has an effect on our property values. And primarily though, it's safety. It's getting something back that we've lost a long time ago. With an annual stabilization fund, what we were able to do is set up a concentric 20-year road and paving plan which will also incorporate sidewalks, safety measures, and will improve the life of people coming in town, our residents, our kids. Thank you again, Cohasset.
Hi, my name is Julie Rollins, and I am the Vice Chair of the Sidewalk Safety and Connectivity Committee. Due to a lack of yearly funding for our roadways and sidewalks, we as a town are in an unfortunate position of playing catch-up to repave or repair surfaces that are long overdue. Creating a stabilization fund will allow us to successfully manage repairs and improvements that need to be made today and put us in a strong position for future years. Together, we can do better, Cohasset.
Hi, my name is Brian Joyce. I'm the Director of Public Works for the town of Cohasset. Here to talk to you about roads and sidewalks. So we have 37 miles of public road in town, and we're on a schedule to pave those about every 20 years. So minimum every 20 years you want to have your road resurfaced. That equates to 1.85 miles of road per year. The cost of goods and services, we all know, have gone up. The cost of paving that 1.85 miles of road per year has gone up significantly. We've had an increased degradation of roads that were paved on large projects in town. We have a lot of infrastructure in front of us that we need to upgrade. So this year we have paved Doane Street, a piece of Church Street. We're in the process of paving Smith Place, a piece of Cushing Road, Margin Street, a piece of Atlantic Avenue going up to Whitehead, and Elm Street, along with the sidewalks on both sides of Elm Street. Next year, we are slated to pave Beechwood Street, Pond Street from Route 3A up past the high school driveway, and South Main Street from the village all the way to the Situate line is on the docket. Without the funding, we won't be able to meet our needs, and we won't be able to stay on our current 20-year cycle. Every single person that crosses the border into Cohasset uses our transportation system and relies on our roads and sidewalks. I encourage you to join me in supporting this additional funding. Thank you.
I'll let you take some questions from folks here and then we'll.
Yeah,
see if anybody on
I
Facebook-
will open it up to if anybody in the room has any questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Just state your name and address.
When you say 37 miles of road, that's what you currently consider your accepted roads. I know the list is kind of old, and are you planning to review at all, like what roads should be considered public roads and what should remain private roads?
Yeah, so that does not really fall within our jurisdiction of the sidewalk. I mean, it's something that we could look at if the
That
select board.
does the town have a plan to take another look at all the roads in town and see? Because for instance, Bates Lane is considered a private road, which nobody, when they buy houses in town, realizes
Yeah.
what's a private road, what's a public road. Our road is wide, has a sidewalk, has a nice hydrant at the top of the street. Very electric lines, you know, it was set up to be accepted as a public road, but never was for some technicality. And has not been paved for 40 years. So I'm just wondering if we're taking a big view, we're gonna start a stabilization fund. It's perhaps the time to really take a big look at all the streets in town. And also you had passed a thing where if it's a private road, all the people along the street are gonna be assessed to pave that road. But if we're paying taxes, for the roads in town to get assessed for our roads doesn't make sense.
You bring up a great point.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll speak a little to that. So we have 37 miles of public road. The public road is basically a road that was accepted at town meeting after development. There's about 13 miles of private road in town. And those are roads that people have frontage on. And in addition to that, we have a significant amount of miles of shared private driveways,
Right.
which also have multiple houses on it for access. And each of those are the private roads and shared common driveways. There's a lot of talk, it was in 2017, 2018, and the select board at the time came up with a private way paving policy, which is out there on the list. And it's a way that private way abutters can get their road paved by the town, but it is, as you said, you're assessed a betterment for the cost of that over a 10-year period. We've done one road with that and Cedar Acres Lane. And we've had a lot of interest in a few other roads, including, I think, some of your neighbors on Bates Lane. But that's, I guess, any more discussion on that would be at the discretion of the select board and if they want to incorporate private ways into any of this.
Just to follow on that, on Beth's comments, Dan Tarpey, Bates Lake. Not looking at it at this point, when we're creating a stabilization fund. In fact, taxing people, and I'm fully behind this, I want to see the fund. The stabilization fund and taxing the town people on the roads and sidewalks for the first time ever. Correct me if I'm wrong, pretty much all maintenance prior to this time, we take out an operating fund for the big grant. Now is the time to take a look at that policy that was passed by the select board in 2017, 2018. At the end of the town meeting, when there were about 100 people there, barely a quorum, it kind of got snuck through. Okay, it's time to take a look at that. Because if you're going to tax specifically for the road and sidewalks, and again, fully support it, then people who have roads like what we live on that should be accepted and meet all engineering requirements to be an accepted road, will find ourselves suffering disparate treatment. We will be paying taxes for other people to get their roads paved, and we'll have to pay some portion of the bill to pave ours. Got to be looked at.
Well, I guess I can say first, thank you for the feedback, and you know, we are aware that the betterment policy is out there. I think a part of this also is a zoning conversation. I know that once we change something into a public way, then we open up a lot of development in what was previously a private way. And so that is a factor. And while this isn't the time in terms of the forum, we are undergoing a big conversation about zoning and how to reform our zoning laws, which are pretty lax, in my opinion. And so you could, for example, change to a public way, and then depending on where you live, all of a sudden create huge development potential on your street, which may not be anticipated. And so I think you raise a very valid point, and that's something the select board can consider and listen to. But I think we also have to be mindful of the zoning implications too, when we talk about private to public, including the unintended consequences for the neighbors and the town more generally. And so that has, at least I wasn't on the select board in 2017-18, but that definitely has been something hovering in the background where we're trying to get ahead on the zoning bylaws and tighten them. I do think, just in the interest of transparency, that we would have to really, so the stabilization fund, to your point, is a tax. It's an effective tax, whether you consider it a tax on operating or capital. The bottom line is it's going to be a new tax on people for a lot of roads that we all use, right? Like in South Main to get to where we live and work and play. But you know, certainly you might not be going to some of the smaller roads off of the main roads and feel like there could be some inequity there. But I do think if we were to add on now an additional brand new 14 miles of private way, that would be a pretty significant financial decision that we would need to account for too, in terms of how we address that. So that's all good feedback that we can consider and look at. But I would flag the zoning issue. I think it's a pretty significant one that probably requires more, because we don't have anything, for example, coming out right now for special town meeting that would address that particular issue in order to protect neighborhoods that might need protection if they were to become private, a public way, accepted ways. I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in, but that's the history of what I know.
We'll just add one thing. So on the costs, we're talking about funding a little bit here. The cost of paving in recent years has been chapter 90, as you said, but not from the operating budget. It's been from a capital, the capital stabilization fund. And if we continued on that path with the, you know, this big cost in front of us, the roads would take up the entirety of that allotment almost every year, and you wouldn't be able to buy fire engines and, other equipment that should really be under the capital fund. So it's a standalone. I think the idea is that this is a standalone just for our roads and sidewalk, which is a big.
I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate that, again, and I fully support the stabilization fund, but it creates disparate treatment, and there's no way around that. Some people are being treated differently as a result of the decision made 2017, 2018, and that needs to be addressed. I agree with the point about zoning, but it doesn't apply on my particular street, and probably quite a few others. There are no zoning issues in that area of making it a public one. But we're here to talk about disparate treatment.
Just put this up for our Zoom friends so they can see this.
Absolutely. Any further questions from the audience or anyone online, Justin?
Nope, so we just had a question from Julie, which I just answered. And then another person asked to see this. So I will, if you're listening, if you drop your email in the chat, I will send you this presentation as well. It'll also be online tomorrow morning.
And the video will be posted as well.
The video we posted, cohassetma.org, the splash screen that pops up. You can click the button in the splash screen or in the upper left-hand corner, 2023 special town meeting. Click on that, all the information is there for you.
And I imagine you're gonna put on 143 Facebook as well.
Yeah, and it's actually on TV tonight as well, and it'll be replayed and replayed.
Lee,
Lee Jenkins, from Jerusalem Road. How many miles of road we have at the present time that doesn't meet that are roads breaking up? How many miles are breaking up?
So, the TEC report that I think is that published online?
Yes.
that's all.
Yeah, so the TEC report, I don't know the figures up there, but
That's all right.
they went through and they looked at the public roads, the 37 miles of roads. They didn't look at the private ones, but the public ones, and they gave a category, a PCI index, which pavement condition index, rating of 1 to 10. And then they categorize ones that need major rehabilitation down to minor rehabilitation. And minor rehabilitation meaning use some crack sealing and things like that. What we want to do is get all the major rehabilitation done, so that we can get on a schedule where we're just doing mills and overlays, not full road reconstruction. And that way it's a lot less expensive to do on roadways when we get in that, just the mill and overlay, which is you scarify the top off and then you put a new top course on it. But Elm Street and others, Marvin Street, they're required more significant work than a mill and overlay.
But any idea roughly how many you complete?
Again, roughly, without looking at the TEC report, I'd say probably 25% of our roads need some major rehabilitation. And then there's varying levels of minor rehabilitation at the end.
and just so Lee is for everybody else moving forward, one of the goals of the committee is to actually look at that list and look and see what roads are actually in dire need of being repaired. And trying to prioritize those roadways first for 2024. And given the amount of funding, we realize we probably can't get to everything in 2024. So some of those roadways would fall to 2025. Early this year, there was some money that Brian kind of found from the state highway improvement fund, I believe, and said, okay, we have, I think it was $130,000. What area of town can we do with $130,000? And we decided to do Doan in Church Street along the Beechwood Playground. And so that was like a kind of a no-brainer. It was a roadway that probably should have been done years ago, and it was low-hanging fruit, and that roadway was done, and I think looks great out there. So yeah, again, we're just trying to prioritize roadways in future fiscal years. And so that we can come up with this 5-year plan to get roadways done, and having a stabilization fund will increase that. If a roadway was maybe scheduled for 2025, with this extra money, it get pushed up to 2024. So we can do more if we have more.
Lee Jenkins, Jerusalem Road. Can someone please explain how the stabilization fund works? You're gonna start it at what, 900,000? And increase the taxes, and then just go keep going up every year? Do people have to vote on it every year? Or is it just a one time, okay, we voted for this and it's gonna be for a forever situation?
Sure. The stabilization fund works as follows. So this is set forth in, pursuant to state law. So this is an override under Prop 2.5, and the first year that the fund is created, it requires a vote at the ballot. So that will be a vote that we all can and should participate in on November 18th. It has to be passed at town meeting as well. And so assuming that the fund is successfully created. And at that point, any time that we want to spend money from the fund, that is subject to a town meeting vote. So for example, if we say, hey, we want to spend 300 or 800 at annual town meeting, that becomes an appropriation out of the stabilization fund, just like we have appropriation out of capital stabilization or the special ed stabilization fund. In terms of how much is funded each year, so after that first initial vote, then each year thereafter, the select board has to decide how much to fund the fund by. And the maximum that the select board can fund the fund by is 2.5%, because it's a Prop 2.5 requirement under state law. So we could increase the fund by 800,000 times 2.5% the following year, and then each year thereafter. It's just like how our regular tax levy works. The difference is we could also drop the fund. So unlike a permanent override under state law, which lasts forever, here the select board has the ability to drop the fund if we so desire for, whatever reason. If, for example, let's say the millionaire's tax that got passed last year at the state ballot, all of a sudden comes through and we get $1 million from the state each year, and we decide, oh, hey, we'll just use state funding. I'm not saying that's gonna happen, probably never happen. But if we say, oh, we can be entirely reliant on state funding, and that's great, then we could move the fund down to zero if we took those. From a tax standpoint, the 800,000 will be approximately $212 in extra tax for the median home assessment, which is $1 million. So it's $212 for every $1 million. And the last thing I would say is that the select board is considering right now a draft stabilization fund policy for both the roads and sidewalk fund, as well as for the school capital fund that we'll talk about. And the long-term financial planning group, which is the chair of the school committee advisory capital budget, and the select board, as well as our town manager. Looking at what we have to do in this town, we are recommending that the select board going forward continue to fund the fund at 800 and increase it by 2.5% to keep up with increasing construction costs as we go along, because a part of the problem in terms of where we're at is because costs have risen, but we haven't been able to grow the revenue on the other hand that we need to address that. So those are all the math and logistics.
Okay, just a question here. You're talking about a 2.5% increase to cover the cost, but the rate of inflation is a lot more than that. So can you go back to town meeting and say, hey, we want to increase it more than 2.5%?
I mean, arguably, yes, we could go back to town meeting and say we want an additional extra on the road stabilization fund of X amount. I think we came to the $800,000 estimate, not only because of the needs, but also looking at the state funding each year, which we assessed around approximately $200,000 under Chapter 90 to get to that $1 million. And, to be perfectly transparent, that's not even necessarily going to cover all of the sidewalk costs that we have, right? That the sidewalks can, including if we're creating sidewalks, can be expensive. And so we're still going to have to make hard decisions and prioritize as we go forward, even with the $1 million budget, because the cost of paving have increased so much so quickly over the last few years in a way we just haven't been able to keep up with. And so we're looking at $800,000 in part because we appreciate it is a tax increase, and we know we're asking for other tax increases with other proposals. So we're trying to balance all of these different demands on the Cohasset residents that we're asking for.
All right, one last question about fund. What about the herd funds that are in budget for this. So you're taking that into account something?
Yeah, so right now, typically, and I know we have the vice chair of capital here, but capital budget typically allocates approximately 300,000 on the capital stabilization fund. But we also know that capital has approximately $4 million in demands and 2 million in the stabilization fund. And so a part of the goal of why we're trying to create the road and sidewalk fund is to also address demands on capital, not just for roads and sidewalks, but for other items, including just making sure we're doing our necessary maintenance and repairs that we need to just really better maintain our town as well. And so a part of it is to relieve some pressure too on the capital stabilization fund to allow them to have more ability to address other capital needs in the town. And the last thing that I would just add is, again, the select board is mindful of the tax burdens, and so we have been looking at other ways to address and to create road revenue, including through the help of our zoning bylaw working group, including Mr. Bragg, who's here, where we have been looking at some zoning bylaw changes for impact fees when you have a big development come in, and have them contribute money into a road and sidewalk fund to increase the fund as well. It won't be a huge amount, but Sawyer Street, for example, that was $700,000, including that new sidewalk. That was all from Avalon, or what's now the Preserve. That was an impact money that they gave us. That was only for that specific strip and that sidewalk, and so we used it for that, but that was a good amount of money that we needed and used and deployed, which really helped.
Just to jump in and get to you in a second, David. We are also exploring federal and state funding. We were made aware of the Massachusetts state grants. Unfortunately, the sidewalk committee was formulated in early April and the grant was due in May 2nd, I believe. So we're kind of behind the 8 ball, but we do have a pending grant out there to make all of the sidewalks handicap accessible, ADA compliant ramps. That was identified in the TEC Towns report. And certainly over the winter, we will work on other grant mechanisms and be applying for additional potential funding for next fiscal year. So we are looking at state and federal funding as well through the grant process.
We need 2/3 vote to town meeting, correct?
That's right.
And this goes to a ballot.
Yes.
David?
David Frog, 39 Beechwood Street. I had a question and a comment, but first I'd like to commend the sidewalk committee for all the work that they were doing on this, and by using the TEC report, the consultants report, is a very sensible, systematic way to go about it, looking at which parts of the town you want to start with sidewalks and roads and where should you start. The question is what about drainage improvements where appropriate for the roads as they get upgraded? And the comment regarding it is that during the when the water and sewer was changed for the Little Harbor project, drainage improvements were made, because at the time when we were on the Conservation Commission, when that project came in front of us, there was no drainage improvements at all. We asked, well, what about the drainage? And they said, what drainage? And so it's not a knock on the water and sewer, but they were so involved in trying to get that massive project done. So went to town meeting, and town meeting approved $1 million+ for drainage improvements. So at least as a part of the Little Harbor project, those areas had drainage improvements regarding it for that and the town, but for the rest of the town, not so much. So the question is, what about drainage improvements for where appropriate in other parts of the town?
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
Yeah, no,
I'll throw that to Brian.
So every street we look at, and this is another factor in our paving schedule is, you know, you can't just look at a road and say it's terrible, it's paved. We have to look at the infrastructure below. Water upgrades, sewer upgrades, and drainage. So for instance, South Main Street is on the docket, but we have to get some water work done from the village to basically St. Anthony's Church first. There's also some culvert drainage that we need to do along that. So every road that's on the list, we do look at the infrastructure and make sure that, you know, if we need to add drainage, we can do it. The challenge with adding sidewalks there too is if there's no existing sidewalk. It's not just the cost of the sidewalk, but it's the cost of the drainage, as you said. You know, you have catch basins along the curb line. And that gets pretty expensive. So that's why the sidewalk, it's a little counterintuitive. You think a little sidewalk shouldn't be as much as a road. But it's double the cost because it's handwork, you have drainage, you have curbing, you have ADA ramps and ADA compliance, so. Anyway, we look at it at every road and we look at the infrastructure. And just a note, because we're all driving over these bad trenches in town. When we do infrastructure like Beechwood Street, we need to let that settle for a season, so we have to drive over crappy trenches for a winter, and then we're gonna have a nice new street later, and it's, you know, it's the eagle you have to go through to get a nice road.
Yeah, so just to your point, David, if you look at the Sawyer Street sidewalk. So I was on conservation during that process, and that process did not pass the first go around. I think we went through about 6 or 8 hearings. As you know, they get continued and always want more. The Conservation Commission requested that the sidewalk be a pervious surface. And so that significantly increases the cost as well. There's maintenance that goes along with that. There was added drainage that was added in there, so it didn't flow right into the wetland that was right off of the existing area there. The trees had to be cut back a little bit, so yeah, that was a significant drainage improvement project going on over there, so it is being evaluated. Any further questions?
Hi, Mike Dick, 27 Parker Ave. Just to follow up on the comment about what about drainage? It also occurs to me that we have a number of proposals for resilience coming out of the Harbor Committee board. And talk at this point, it's very informal, about creating higher berms or higher roadways in order to protect areas from flooding, mainly coming off the Gulf. So I'm not advocating anything specific, but just here's another thing that we need to keep in front of us as we move ahead with this effort. So just want to leave that.
Thank you.
And sorry about my phone.
Yeah, no, and we are aware of that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I'm happy to say we did get notice today from CZM that we got a resiliency grant for designing those resiliency upgrades around the harbor. And also for wastewater infiltration improvements around the harbor. So we just got that notice a few hours ago. So we'll keep chasing the grants and hopefully.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Either Ellen or Lance, I don't know who wants to take it away from schools, but.
All right, I'll start. Hi, everyone. My name's Ellen Marr, and I'm on the select board. I'm presently the clerk of the select board and a liaison to the school facilities committee. And I served on the school committee for 6 years, so I kind of know my way around the buildings a little bit. So last spring, and then really with full force this fall, the select board began talking about a school stabilization fund for repairs and maintenance. The mechanics of which are identical to what we just talked about in terms of how it's formed, when it's voted on, and how it's funded every year. And the genesis of this came out of an AI3 report that was done last year to provide support for an application to the MSBA for to their core program for renovation or rebuild of a new middle high school. And so waiting for that, we didn't want to wait for that. We wanted to kind of move forward because these buildings, there are assets of the town, and we have done some maintenance and repairs over the years, but not enough. So I don't know, Justin, if you want to run the video.
Sure.
Because I don't want to say what I've already said.
Sure.
And I'm not quite sure what I've said on there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, folks online, stand by for a second. You'll see a blank screen that it'll pop up in a moment. So.
I don't think I can do much.
I know, I can't watch mine.
I-
I might actually hide it at the table.
Or Justin, another take.
Yeah.
On the Cohasset Select Board. I'm Ellen Marr. I'm
on the Cohasset Select Board, and I'm here at 143 Pond Street, home of Cohasset Middle High School and the administrative offices for the Cohasset Public School District. I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about the Stabilization Fund we're putting on the town warrant for special town meeting on November 13th to fund school maintenance and repairs. This campus is about 18 acres. The building itself is over 220,000 square feet. Combined with Deer Hill and Osgood, we're looking at over 400,000 square feet of teaching and learning space and over 40 acres of land. Comprehensive study was done last year assessing all of the campus's interior and exterior buildings and grounds, and it was determined that we have needs for roofs, windows, doors, mechanicals, and other building maintenance and repairs. So we're asking you to support the warrant article at special town meeting for $1.5 million for school stabilization fund, because after all, we're stewards of the town and it's our responsibility to take care of these buildings.
I'm Dr. Patrick Sullivan, Superintendent of Cohasset Public Schools. Well, I think it's going to be a wonderful development in our school facilities, particularly as we look at our facilities needs and the upgrades that we need in our systems, our alarm systems, our flooring, our roofing, other HVAC and air condition needs. It's completely necessary from just a maintenance upgrade perspective. You know, the school buildings, they do have natural wear and tear. Systems need to be upgraded. 1,400 students in the district who are traversing around our buildings. So for those of you who are watching and who have the ability to come out and support this initiative, I wholeheartedly support it, and I thank you for really helping the students and the staff of Cohasset Public Schools.
Hi, I'm Jake Ellis, the Assistant Director of Facilities for Town of Cohasset. We're going through the roofing systems of all the schools, and they're all reached their useful life. A few years ago, we did implement a preventative maintenance program with a company that comes and inspects and does patchwork as needed, but they've all reached their useful life. One of our big ticket items coming up is the fire monitoring system at the high school. It's 20 years old, it's reached its expected lifespan. We're able to patch it and piece it together and keep it running, but it is definitely due to be replaced. It would make our jobs a lot easier knowing that we're able to fund the things that are needed to be funded to keep the schools up and running.
Hello. My name is Lance Dial, and I'm the chair of the Cohasset School Committee. As you've seen from this video and from visiting our schools facilities are aging and in need of capital improvements, as with anything that ages. This School Stabilization Fund is a responsible way to ensure that we're able to meet those increasing maintenance and development needs. And the truth of the matter is, for so long as we want to have our children in Cohasset go to school in buildings in Cohasset, we will have to pay those maintenance needs. So in some ways, the bills are already due. It's just figuring out whether we pay them thoughtfully, responsibly, and hopefully more cost effectively through this funding mechanism, or whether we are forced to defer maintenance until there's a crisis and make discrete requests for potentially larger sums of money in the future. This stabilization fund will allow the schools to look ahead and make appropriate plans regarding these aging facilities, and also to mute the impact of any necessary significant investments, such as a renovation or perhaps a replacement. On behalf of the schools, I ask that you support the School Stabilization Fund. It will give us the resources to give our kids the schools that they deserve.
Okay. Thank you, Justin. You cut out a lot of what I said. That's good. No, so in all seriousness, you know, these buildings are aging. The Deer Hill and this building, this complex was built in the early 1950s, renovated in 1966, and again in 2001. Osgood, quote, our newest building was built in 1998 and is a quarter of a century old. We can't call it new anymore. And through the Capital Stabilization Fund, we've been able to put together, you know, some needed repairs. So I took a look at capital, and since 2018 annual town meeting, capital has allocated 11.5 million, and 3.9 million went to the schools. So 33.5% of capital. Now, the capital, you have to understand, we talked about it earlier, it's trucks, it's fire engines, it's police cruisers, it's bus leases, it's technology, it's anything capital oriented over $10,000. And then of our 3.9 million, true maintenance items were 2.6 million. So not even that whole amount went to building maintenance and repairs. We went into a bus lease model several years ago instead of buying buses, because buying buses was cost prohibitive at over 100,000 each, and then the maintenance cost and having someone dedicated, and the bus lease model at the time proved to be the most economical. And since that's a capital expense, since 2018, that was about $662,000. And then technology, we were, writing on chalkboards and abacuses, but I'm dating myself, I'm kidding. No, but we really had to move technology forward for the kids with Chromebooks, so Chromebook leases every year, iPad leases, iPad cards. I think we just capital funded the smart boards for all of the middle school, so that, as Mr. Dial indicated, we have all of the current 21st century learning mechanisms for students, because it's not a stand and deliver model anymore for today's education and what our children are going to, or everybody's children will be facing going forward, into their future post-secondary life. So this stabilization fund is very important, because again, capital is a little less than 2 million. Capital stabilization fund is a little less than $2 million a year. And we cannot catch up, much like the roads, we cannot catch up with the things that need to be done at our schools. Again, there's a little over 553,000 square feet of building space that the town maintains, and the schools represent 77% of that. So that's a lot of square footage, over 400,000 square feet. And as the video said, over 40 acres of land and grounds. And it can't be done on a couple $100,000 a year. So if this is approved at town meeting, Nick Berardi and Jason Earls, who's here, he's the chair of the school facilities committee, and the school committee, and Dr. Sullivan and his team will go through the list that has been vetted in terms of the highest priority critical needs, and then the next tier critical needs, and come out with a plan of how the 1.5 million is going to be allocated. I don't want to speak to those items, but they covered what we talked about: roads, sidewalks, fences, driveways, roofs, windows, doors, mechanicals, HVAC units. So there's a lot on there that needs to be attended to. And that's about all I have to say.
Yeah, so thank you, Ellen. You covered, you in the video cover pretty much everything. I guess I'll just set a point. I don't necessarily need to do this for this audience, but it just happened, so I'll share it. I was late coming here because I drive a 30-year-old car and it broke down. We're in 30-year-old buildings, and without maintenance, they're breaking down too. And as much as we try to stretch the dollar and get as far as we can go, we need the money. And whether we do it now or we do it later, we're gonna have a $10 million bill for roofs coming. So there's money that needs to be spent to have this. And then Ellen raised the point of the modern pedagogical needs. We've got to evolve our schools too. Like, I don't think anybody in here likes being in this room. This room is not conducive for this meeting. It's just like our teachers in their classrooms. The way that the education has changed over years, kids are learning in groups, they're teaching each other. And that's not what you can do with the way our rooms are laid out. And I've seen it firsthand. I was just in a walkthrough earlier this week, and I've seen the teachers try and work this education model into these things. They need new furniture, they need new equipment. They are showing videos on white cement walls because we just don't have the resources we need. So in any event, this is a maintenance issue, this is a development issue, this is making sure that our kids are getting the education they need. My reason to being on the school committee is to make sure we don't lose the community aspect of our schools by having kids go to private school, because people here can choose that. And I want to make sure that our schools are competitive with other options and that our kids are getting what they need. So I don't know if we want to just open up the questions, or
Mr. Earls or Dr. Sullivan, would you like to?
I just want to say, everything already has been said. I just want to let everyone know it's a substantial list. It's been broken down basically 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 5 to 10 year plans, so there is a, you know, a look out ahead. So, you know, this will start the process. Buildings are old, as everyone has seen and has talked about. So I think this is a good start.
And I would agree with that. I think we have a very responsible mechanism here that would provide building maintenance for many years to come if it so was approved every year. And, you know, when you look at groups like the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, they're looking for districts to have plans in place for their maintenance. So I think this is also a very responsible model in that regard too. So I just want to thank everyone for the consideration of this. And thank the teams that have worked so hard to put this forward.
Open up for questions. We'll start here in the room and then we'll go to Zoom and see if anybody's got some questions. Yes, and just directed towards a member here. Sure.
I'm just second, would you explain stand and deliver and understand what you said about that?
Oh, well, back when we were in school, the teacher would stand in front of the room and the kids would all be in their desks looking forward and the teacher would deliver the lesson. And it's not that anymore.
Thank you.
Sure.
I thought of it as the term a burglar uses when they hold you up.
Totally different. Totally different.
Sorry,
We're really looking at more collaborative learning models.
no,
So
I get that.
furniture facilitates it. Spacing is a problem at times, and particularly in this building. But yes, that's exactly. Thank you.
No, big check is Bruce and Willie again. I think everybody needs a history lesson here. A few years back, I don't know, 20 years ago, so. We used the school committee, the school department was funded for maintenance. They funded themselves, came out of their budget. Since that couldn't be done properly, the town took it back. And they took it out of their budget, and I think we appropriated $1 million, am I right about that?
It's a little over.
For the schools and the town, right?
Correct.
But most of it goes to the schools, am I correct in that?
Well, as you said, it's about 77% of the square footage is the large schools.
Right. See, my only point here is, are the schools gonna be able to use this money without a town meeting vote?
No.
For the project?
No, it's exactly as the roads. It has to go through the capital appropriation process, like any capital project, and then it has to go on town meeting warrant.
Why can't the town have the money? Then the schools come in and ask, I don't know why they have in the past, because all these problems we're having with the schools. Why hasn't the schools come before the town and asked for the money to do the repairs?
They have.
Well, we have
I-
through the capital budget process, which is funded at $1.9 million a year.
Okay,
And just to give a little color on that, so we do make capital requests. Those capital requests are put before the town and the town votes on those. But we know that when the town capital budget is, let's call it 4 million total, going to capital request with a $10 million roof request is not going to happen. So this is our way to mitigate that so that we have a steady school dedicated income stream to help. And frankly, we didn't necessarily need this 10 years ago because our buildings were newer. They needed less maintenance. But as our buildings age, just like my car, they need more attention, more time. And so we are observing the need to have additional funding dedicated for the schools that we request in the same process that we do now through capital. But this way, it's a dedicated stream of funding that's used for the school facilities because we know we're going to need it.
the problem here is, I've never heard about any request that the schools had to do repair work, it was turned down, that it was turned down before.
So it goes through the capital advisory process. And so what you see on the town warrant is what's left. So yes, there are lots of things that have been left on the cutting room floor that don't get funded. I mean, things like tiles on the floor, ceiling tiles. I don't know, Dr. Sullivan, you probably have a list off the top of your head.
Well, I mean, the AA3 report, it's not a secret, estimated between 55 and 65 million in needs for the schools over the next 10 years. And of course, that's broken down year by year. Our own maintenance team feels they can be more frugal with their approach and do great work. But yeah, and I want to make sure everyone understands, we're very conscious of the generosity of the capital committee and the work they've done to fund it, but there's a finite amount of funding for a great amount of need. In all the areas, systems, roofing, flooring, our grounds, which, we're responsible for at this point, and it's just a lot. If you think about over a 10-year period. So we have put forward, and I can only speak for the last 5 years, we have put forward requests that haven't been fully funded, although we feel the town is doing a great job in helping.
And I think, let me just give an example, and I'll use round numbers, but our last year's capital request was somewhere like 2.5 million, and we only got 900 grand, is that right?
Yeah,
Something like that.
That's pretty accurate.
So there's a process where we've asked for lots and we've been given what's available, so.
And I say that with great respect for the teams.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we're here, because there's a finite pie. I don't know if I could call people, but.
Yeah.
Go, Mr. Dick.
It's Mike Dick, 27 Parker Ave. This time I'm speaking as the co-chair. I keep saying that. I'm not the
Vice
co-chair. Vice chair, thank you. Capital Budget Committee. And just to speak to what Leland Jenkins is asking. The capital budget stabilization fund has been severely constrained over the last, I'll say, 8 years plus. And so, and it's been mentioned, we have to weigh all the different town departments' requests. Each annual town meeting and sometimes special town meeting, but annual town meetings when we get it. And so we'll have $4+ million in requests across 8 or 9 different departments. And every department comes before us and they make their case. And then it's up to capital budget to ask the hard questions. And we'll turn to those chairs of those different departments and say, prioritize these lists for us. Because we know we don't have enough money. And Mr. Sullivan and others make a very strong case for a lot of their needs. So it is well vetted. And then it goes to advisory. And advisory, I think, also depends, as well as select board, on what capital budget has done to really go through those requests and try and squeeze them into that 2 million. Now, having said that, what I'm hopeful on is this school stabilization fund and the road stabilization fund will allow capital budget committee to review these different department requests with a little bit more breathing. I don't know if that's going to turn out that way, but here's hoping. There is one other point I want to make that hasn't really been raised yet, and it's more an observation rather than a criticism. But the capital budget is not absolutely sure that the town manager in crafting the annual budgets is really doing everything they can to keep those budgets tight enough to allow for the maintenance, and we've harped on this so many years, maintenance is doing enough to provide enough in maintenance. So I do support these stabilization funds, but I also want to be sure that we are keeping those tax increases to the absolute minimum by ensuring that our annual budgets are being sharply managed to give us maybe a little bit more extra juice that we don't have to go to the taxpayers to fund. So I'll kick away my soapbox and thank you for your attention.
Dan talking base lane, question for Dr. Sullivan. Doctor, I heard reference to the AI3 engineering report, and you mentioned a figure of about $65 million in requirements. How much of that would be required for the middle high school building?
I don't have those figures broken down right in front of me, but the good majority is this building.
Did the report recommend that this building undergo a major renovation and or a tear down? As
Correct.
options?
That was the report's recommendation.
And do they have a timeline, given when they'd like to see this done or when it should be done?
They felt that it should be done in the next 1 to 3 years in terms of that. But there are, again, there's 2 plans here. There's there's ongoing maintenance plans, which they've stretched out around 10 years. But they did make that recommendation, and that report's available publicly. You know, it's on our website.
And are we actively pursuing MSBA funding for
We are.
a renovation and or replacement of the school building?
Yes, we are.
In fact, I'll add, there's also another item that will be on the warrant for a $400,000 study that will help give us some guideposts on what to do with our existing facilities and give us more clarity on those recommendations of renovation, tear down. They'll also look at our town's financial capabilities, what we can do, what we can't do, what our spacing or needs are. And the other nice thing about that is that the stabilization fund is also a tool that we could use in that regard as well. So it could help out mitigate the financial impact of a massive renovation should we go down that road, or building replacement should we go down that road. So this is, again, helping us plan for the future.
Follow-up question, if I might, the study that is proposed, isn't that a redo of the extant AI3 study that was done?
No, the AI3 study was an existing condition study. They go through the building of all the grounds in the school. And they go through the grounds and say, here's what they look like today. This new report will be a report of here's where you are, here's where you can be, and here's the path and you can get there. Here are your options, and let us see so we can appropriately plan as to what our options are.
Is it a precursor for MSBA funding?
It is not a precursor for MSBA funding, but it is a precursor for us to plan how we're going to continue our capital maintenance plans.
Appreciate it.
And I would say, we understand that for some of the items we're looking at in that study, if we do get into the MSBA, so this is our second year applying, then we believe that the MSBA will accept some of that work towards the more fulsome MSBA analysis required.
I was here for the last one 20 years ago. My son started at the high school the year it was completed.
No, it was when it started.
Okay, thank you. The village had now 2 renovations, and the latest one was a fairly expensive one, largely funded by the MSBA. To get that funding back in those days, Cohasset jumped ahead of other towns by saying we had a shovel ready to go type of project. Other towns have yet to have invited this out. So if we do not get MSBA funding for this project, what is plan B? Given the state of the schools as they are now.
So, I mean, the fact of the matter is that any big renovation, any school replacement is very expensive.
Yes.
So right now, MSBA is a huge portion of our plans because that is a massive offset to that expense. If we aren't able to get MSBA, one path is to try again. There's 1 to 3 years. We have the building is not collapsing on our kids. So we have some life left in the building, and part of what the stabilization fund will allow us to do is to extend the life as far as we need it. So that's one part. But frankly, from where I sit, unless we can find some massive private funding someplace, I don't know that there's a realistic way we can assess the town for the full cost without MSBA support of a full building replacement. There may be different views on that financially, but that's what I think.
Fully support the stabilization fund. I'm with you 100%. I'm just worried that the MSBA is going to say no, if for good reason, given our history with them.
On that point, we are working the angles that we can. So we're going to ask Senator O'Connor to come to one of our school committee meetings, and he's volunteered to get the head of the MSBA to come visit our schools and visit our school committee. So we are trying to build those relationships, trying to get them to consider our schools. They did just fund something in Hingham, so South Shore is a place, and we can actually demonstrate that of all the districts that have received MSBA funding in the past 10 or 15 years, Cohasset is the only one in the South Shore that is received $0.
It's actually over 20.
Over 20.
So we're, for those who look at Cohasset as down on the list for receiving, we're on an island in terms of not being funded by the MSBA in this area for the last 23 years.
I'm not sure how much longer you can stay on the island, because I think that one of the requirements the MSBA is going to give you is that you combine school systems with health, regional school system. to make it more palatable. I've heard that before. Has anybody else heard that that might be a requirement?
Not heard that.
Okay.
I heard the NPR story a few years ago, but I think that was NPR, not necessarily.
He was talking about the last time, 12 years ago, so I suspect it will raise its rate again as a condition of MSBA funding possible.
And I would just say too, that if we are fortunate enough to get into the MSBA program, we still have Deer Hill and Osgood to take care of. So it's not like the $1.5 million goes away. To Jean's earlier point, the select board can then look at it and say, okay, MSBA is going to take care of Cohasset Middle and High School, and now we don't need 1.5 million, but maybe 1.2 or whatever that number is. Osgood and Deer Hill need to be maintained, so that we're not, in a few years asking for MSBA funding for those buildings.
Understood, but fully supported. They ask for more.
Two. There it is.
Yeah. Let's round it up.
Yeah, I suppose I would say that the select board is moving through some painful challenges in public construction right now, as we've seen with town hall and then our police and fire station. And, we're trying to buy our way out in the commercial market with some of these challenges, which we've been lucky enough to find locations to do so. And plug, if anyone wants to learn more, there's one stage right here, but on the police and fire and town hall projects. But I will say, and I'm not speaking for the select board, but just from what I've seen from reviewing all of the commercial real estate and land and fields and facilities in Cohasset, it's going to be very hard to buy our way into a new school in terms of commercial real property. It's just, the schools are such a unique animal that we really have to take care of it.
The other thing is the schools are our bread and butter aspect. Besides the.
That's why I'm here.
Just a quick question, what is the tax impact on the $1 million assessment?
398,
What is it,
398 or 399. Just call it even 400. But 400 for $1 million assessment, 400.
We have no questions.
If I could just make one clarification, 400 is first year. Is that right? It's every year.
Yeah. So,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm mixing and matching the noises.
yeah, with the building proposals, you start high and then work your way down, stabilization fund. You're either
You're
flat,
saying-
or if you go up at 2.5, you got a small. Yes.
Well, I'm gonna
Yeah.
plug our next meeting, if I may. Fields, courts and playground, October 16th, Paul Pratt Memorial Library at 7 p.m. Once again, it will be on Facebook, 143, and Zoom, and all of that information is already posted online. So if anybody's interested in learning about that project, come on down.
I just want to say one more thing. Lance has spoken from the school committee, and we've heard from Jason from the school facility committee, and all of this really started with Craig McClellan. He's sitting here in the audience. He's vice chair of the school committee. I serve with him. I had that privilege to do so, and Mr. Senior found the town bylaw, because the school facilities committee is a bylaw committee, and Mr. McClellan was relentless in getting it seated and relentless in pushing forward these projects because of how much he cares about the schools and about the kids and about the environment in which they learn. So thank you for keeping us pushing forward.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, we need two, thank you, Jean. We need two positions filled on the school facilities committee. Applications, you can go right online on the town website. And I forget what it's called, like board and committee positions to be filled or something. There's an application. And Jason is nodding his head. You don't have to have any special talents other than just a desire to serve and learn about the schools if you're not involved. It's a very, the school system is very dynamic, interesting, complex, and exciting environment to be in. So,
Yeah. I'll hand it back to you. If you guys want to adjourn.
yeah, do we want to adjourn? Do you have anything else?
No,
No? No?
nothing online.
All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Thank you, everyone, for coming.